over the course of a couple of years turned into like, let's talk about all of your emotional problems and how you're fucked you up. So
yeah. Hey, and welcome back to the Smart Couple Podcast, episode number 102. I'm Jayson Gaddis, guys, and I'm your host today. I get a little time with you today, which is very cool. We get weekly time together. Granted, it's a little one way, okay? But I think you appreciate what I'm bringing after 100 episodes of extremely valuable content around relationship and partnership. I'm guessing you're okay with that semi-one-way relationship. All right. If you're new, welcome. Here at the Smart Couple Podcast, we talk about partnership, monogamy, long-term relationship, marriage, etc. And I interview neuroscientists, sexperts, experts of relationship, authors, bloggers, writers, couples, and everyday men and women discussing what it means to be in a relationship and have a vibrant sex life and relationship life over many years. If you're returning, welcome back. You know the deal, you know the program, and we're about to get into it. All right, I wanted to quickly announce the winners of the podcast contest for our 100th episode. To celebrate, I gave away about $700 worth of prizes, and I'm going to announce those here real quick. So Melissa from Cleveland won a free month in our relationship school Roots community. And her favorite episode was the how to deal with a distancer-pursuer dynamic. Our next prize went to Leonora, who is from Oakland, California. She won a 30-minute laser coaching session with me on her relationship stuff. And her favorite episode was episode 50, how and why my wife and I chose marriage. And then our grand prize winner, who won the Indestructible Partnerships course, was Vanessa from Orem, Utah. And her favorite episode was episode 53, how to feel safe and secure with your partner. So these courageous people put in videos in the private Smart Couple Facebook community, which you can join today if you want, for free. It's just on Facebook, and you just got to ask to join, and we'll let you in there. And there's a lot of amazing people in there having intense, heartfelt, vulnerable conversations about intimacy. So thanks, guys, for playing. Thanks everyone else who made a video to try to win in this contest here. We will do that again soon. There's other fun things coming up in the relationship school and with the Smart Couple. So I really appreciate you guys and your ears, and it's my way of just saying thank you. In this episode, I interview Mark Manson, who's a new friend of mine and author. He's got a New York Times bestselling book out right now called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. We talk about that in this episode and why that pertains to relationships. And if you read it, it's got some good chapters on relationship. And it's really just a great common sense, no bullshit guide to life. Mark has written extensively about relationships. I talk about how I first found out about him. And if you're not following him on Facebook or his blog, I would, because he's entertaining, he's funny, he's witty, he's smart, and he offers good stuff that's practical to people like you and me. A little snapshot of Mark. Mark Manson is a blogger, author, and entrepreneur. He specializes in writing personal development advice that doesn't suck. His website, markmanson.net, is read over by 2 million people each month, and he lives in New York City with his new wife. Okay, in this episode, we get into all kinds of stuff. Mainly, we get into the big difference between successfully married people who've been married for a decade or 2 or 3 versus people who got a divorce after 8 or so years. And what's the difference? And he asked his list and Facebook before he got married, what the difference was. Like, what makes a successful marriage? What makes it not work? And the responses came pouring in, and you'd be surprised about the difference between what divorced people said, and what these quote unquote successfully married people said. All right. So that's about halfway through the interview. We, of course, get into a little bit about Mark's life, who he is. He just recently got married, how him and his wife work it out. We talk about a big challenge they had together and how they worked through it. What did they do? And then some tips and tools on what Mark does personally to work through his own baggage, and some concepts that you've heard before around self-awareness and self-improvement. Essentially, no surprise here at the Smart Couple, working on yourself, growing and developing yourself. All right. So you'll hear that in this episode as well. So I think you're going to like this one a lot, and it's going to be eye-opening, particularly this middle section when we reveal what the big difference is. So listen closely for that. And as always, stay tuned to the very end for a little action step to move the needle forward in your relationship life. Here we go. Mark Manson. All right. Welcome to the show, Mark Manson.
Hey, Jayson. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. I've been hungry to get you on here for a while, and really grateful that you're here, because I read a blog post of yours a couple of years back that my wife showed me, called "The 5 Things We Never Learned in School," or should have, or something like that. And the second one, of course, was relationship. And I just lit up because I was in the process of designing and developing this relationship school. So anyway, I've really appreciated your posts in particular on relationship, and I want to just dive in with you today.
Sounds good.
So give us a little, who are you, backstory, like who's Mark Manson? What are you up to in the world?
Sure. So I'm a blogger and author. I've written 2 books, one self-published and one conventionally published, and have been blogging for about 8 or 9 years on self-development issues, or like personal growth, things like that. But I actually got my start in dating advice, funny enough. And so my roots is basically kind of writing about dating, relationships, being attractive, being emotionally stable, dealing with conflict, breakups, stuff like that.
Nice. How did you get into the dating thing? Was that something you were in pain around or fired up about, or what?
Yeah. So it actually very much kind of happened accidentally. My first girlfriend ended up cheating on me and leaving me. So I was like very broken up and confused. I kind of went through one of those experiences that I think a lot of people go through, where it's like, wow, everything I thought I knew about love and relationships is apparently wrong. And so I need to figure out what the hell I'm doing. And so I got really big into it. And I actually kind of developed a network in Boston, which is where I was living. Knew some guys who went to support groups, and kind of met some other men in similar situations, and had some friends that wanted to start an online business, like selling or promoting different like dating courses and ebooks and stuff like that. And they needed a web guy. So I jumped on this web guy, and 6 months later I was running the whole thing by myself.
Wow. And what kind of advice or information were you selling or offering to people?
Well, back then it was pretty I don't want to say superficial because it sounds really bad, but it was definitely on the shallow side of the pool, so okay. It's like, I was a 24-year-old guy. I was single. I had a girlfriend pretty much almost all through college. So I didn't really know what I was doing. And so it was basic stuff like, first date tips and places to go and how to ask for a phone number. And that's where it started.
Okay.
That was the first couple of years. And eventually what happened is the more I dived into these these concepts and ideas, and the more I received questions from readers about what was going on in their lives, it quickly became apparent that this runs very deep, so what a person might perceive as their inability to say, get a boyfriend or a girlfriend, is often there's like some underlying emotional issues or baggage that needs to be resolved down there. And so what started out as kind of like a very flippant, like, here's 5 first date ideas, like over the course of a couple of years turned into like, let's talk about all of your emotional problems and how you're going to talk to up. So
yeah. Nice. And you're married now?
Yep.
And you just got married?
Yeah. 4 months ago.
Wow. Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. How's it going so far?
It's great. It's we're still in the, I mean, if it wasn't great right now, then I think that would be something to be concerned about. But yeah, it's been wonderful.
Cool. Awesome. And no kids yet, right?
Nope.
Okay. Is there kids on the menu someday?
It's in discussion.
Okay. Cool. I highly recommend it.
Cool.
Just from my own experience here.
Yeah. Nice.
So as you started to kind of understand people a little better from the early days of your dating advice career onto now you're a married man and you write a lot about relationships, what are some of the common themes and challenges and issues that you see out there that people are going through that you particularly like to talk about or write about?
Well, it's funny, Jayson, you've probably had a similar experience, is like, when you first start learning about this stuff, it feels like there are a million different problems and everyone has their own special, unique situation that is like, very hard to deal with. And then the more you learn about it, the more you realize that really it's just the same handful of problems that just pop up over and over and over, just in different ways for different people. So if I was to really lay out the fundamental issues that people have in relationships, I'd say healthy boundaries is probably like the first and biggest one. I would say self-love and self-care is another big one, because generally our relationship with ourselves very much sets the precedent for how other people treat us and how we expect other people to treat us. And then I would also say just a good open line of communication and a healthy amount of trust between each person. It's a lot of people have trouble communicating in such a way that it fosters greater trust and greater openness rather than shutting things down.
Yeah, totally. And okay, so let's go back to that first one you mentioned, boundaries. Unpack that a little bit for us. Like, what do you mean saying, having healthy boundaries?
Sure. So the way I define boundaries is basically, let's say just between, for sake of example, between my wife and I am responsible for my emotions and she is responsible for her emotions. That sounds kind of obvious, but it's also what happens when we have porous boundaries is that I'll start taking responsibility for her emotions, or she'll start trying to take responsibility for my emotions, or I'll start expecting her to take responsibility for my emotions. If you look at most relationship conflict, it comes down to like one of those boundary breaches. It's like, I feel this way and it's your fault. And it's a delicate issue to sit there and say like, okay, I feel this way and that's bad, but it's not necessarily my partner's fault that I feel guilty or sad or lonely or whatever. They're just trying to meet their needs. They're trying to make themselves happy. I'm trying to make myself happy. Like, we need to talk in a way that we're still responsible for our own actions and our own emotions, but like find a way that we can both get our needs met without impeding on the other person.
Yeah. Okay. And what's one thing a person could do to, hey, I want to get my needs met over here?
So a lot of it really is it's the difference between saying like, Um, I'm trying to think of like a simple example. So like, you know, let's say I'm like, hey, when you go out with your girlfriends, it makes me really insecure and sad. So you can't go out with your girlfriends anymore. Like that is an example of poor boundaries because I'm not respecting her independence and autonomy, and I'm making her responsible for my emotions.
Uh-huh.
And that's just not fair to do to people, and it's also impossible because it's impossible for us to know what our partner is feeling at any given time. Instead, what I should say is I should say, hey, when you go out with your girlfriends, it makes me feel insecure. I don't want to make you stop because I know you have fun. But what can you do? What can we do together to make sure that I don't always feel this way? And then maybe my wife would be like, well, how about this? How about I just text you while I'm out by myself, and just let you know what I'm doing. And because she's offering it, and it's fair, it feels good for both of us because now she's taking responsibility for her. She's aware of how her behavior is affecting me, but she's not responsible for the emotions that she's affecting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and she's also not sort of saying, well, hey, that's your problem, tough shit, I'm going to be out with my girlfriends. She's
Right.
actually considering your feelings.
Right. So, but uh, it needs to be opted into by the person themselves. Like it can't just be, you can't have this, because what a lot of people do when they fall into this trap of, well, it's her fault, or it's her responsibility to make sure I don't feel insecure at any time, is then you started getting into these games of manipulation where you start trying to trick the other person into doing what you want them to do. So in this example, maybe I would start getting passive aggressive and like start like talking shit about her friends so that she won't want to hang out with them as much anymore, or
Yeah.
I'll try to like make conflicting plans on nights that she wants to go out, and then try to make her feel really guilty for wanting to go out. It's if you're able to simply speak openly without assigning blame or responsibility for each other's emotions, then you can simply just say like, hey, we both want to be happy, how can we make each other happy in this situation?
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. And you kind of mentioned the friends, like we're just playing with this example here. I'm going out with my friends. How important is it, do you think, that couples have friends outside of their relationship?
Extremely important. um, it's extremely important that both couples maintain an individual identity, or sorry, both people maintain an individual identity in the relationship, um, because it's if they don't, they start kind of, it's psychologists call it enmeshment, where they can't really tell where their own personal feelings and desires begin, and or like the difference between the relationship's feelings and desires and their own personal feelings and desires, and it just creates a very unhealthy, unsatisfying dynamic for people. And so the ideal relationship is you have two strong independent individuals that support each other and care for each other, but don't enmesh with one another.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Nice. Yeah. And I think, I mean, I know for me, having like male friends that I can get really real with and even talk about my relationship with, especially if I'm struggling, let's say, and get some honest feedback, right?
Yeah.
So it's also, I just want to underscore the value of really good friends that would also call you out on your bullshit. That kind of friend too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because our partner can do that plenty, and it can get a little muddied in those waters. So I just love the outside of our couple. Yeah. What do you and your wife currently, you're early on in your marriage. How long have you guys been dating? How long have you been together?
It's funny that we're doing this interview today. Today is the 5-year anniversary of us meeting.
Oh, wow. Nice. Congrats again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. And I'm guessing in those 5 years, you weren't dating from that moment maybe, but somewhere in those 5 years, you've had some challenges.
Oh yeah. Of
Yeah.
course.
All right. Take us to like one of those challenging moments, and what sort of tool or what was the thing that you did or she did that really helped you through it? Because a lot of listeners, it helps to hear personal stories from people like, just normal people like, hey, we struggle
Yeah.
too.
I would say there was really only, I mean, we've had a lot of challenges and fights, but there was really only one period that we went through where we really questioned, like, is this going to work? Like, are we going to make it? And so just to give a little bit of background, she's Brazilian. I'm American. I met her down in Brazil. I was already living abroad for a while at that point. And she and I was in Brazil for a few months. We dated while I was there, and then I left for about 6 months. We kept in touch, and then it was kind of clear that we were really falling for each other. Like, she came and visited me, and I was living in Colombia at the time, and I made the decision of, like, I really want to see where this goes. So I moved back to Brazil and lived there for about a year. At the end of the year, due to a variety of reasons that I won't bore you with, she decided to quit her job and leave Brazil with me. And I'm a writer. I work online. So I can kind of work anywhere I want, whether I'm in Asia or in the US or at home for Christmas. Like, it doesn't really matter where I am. I'm still a writer.
Yeah.
I still do my job. She kind of went into this limbo of, okay, I wake up, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with my day. I feel like kind of lazy because here's my boyfriend who's like still working as we're traveling and living in these different places. It was the first time she had ever like quit her career. So it was actually the first time she had been unemployed since she was, I think, 15.
Mm-hmm.
So she kind of went into an identity crisis herself and didn't know who she was, what she wanted. She became a little bit depressed, was just very much struggling with herself. And this kind of comes back to one of those first 3 points I made, where our relationship with ourselves defines much of what happens within the relationship. And so from my perspective, it was like, hey, met this amazing woman. She just quit her job. She has this opportunity to travel around the world with me. We're going to these amazing locations, doing really cool stuff. And so to me, it's like, she should be grateful. Like, she should be having the time of her life right now,
right.
And yeah. I'm giving her like incredible opportunities to explore the world and do all this amazing shit. And meanwhile, she's miserable.
Right.
And she's just struggling the whole time. And it was very, very hard for a few months. And the way we came out of it, fortunately for us, I mean, we identified the issue pretty quickly after a few fights, and that helped me get a lot of empathy for her and what she was going through. And then on top of that, what we discovered very quickly was we needed to establish some sort of like kind of no longer a new identity for her, but like a sense of home for ourselves. Mm-hmm. So we kind of like slowed down, stopped, stayed in a city for a while, made some friends. She started making some girlfriends, and she started working on some online projects herself. So like, she found some things to do with her day. And then once that happened, like, she started feeling better, and we started getting along better, and we came out of it. But there were definitely some dark days there. I mean, there were days where she was like, should I go home? Like, should I just say, screw this, I'm going home? Like, good luck.
Yeah.
Nice knowing you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we stuck it out and made it.
Nice. And it sounds like one of the pivotal moments there was identifying what the issue was and getting on the same page about it.
Yes, because the first handful of fights we had, in my mind, I'm just like, wow, I had no idea she was such an ungrateful bitch.
Yeah.
That was totally my perspective. And and from her perspective, I was probably like selfish and negligent and not paying attention to like what was going on with her, which is, and there's little bits of truth on both sides. But what's important is understanding not necessarily uh, you know, not focusing so much on what the emotions are, like getting underneath and finding out where those emotions are coming from, finding out the why behind why are you feeling this way? Why do you feel like she's ungrateful? Why does she feel like she's like, not being heard, or why is she feeling miserable despite the fact that like things should be good? Um, Once you can both go down there together, um, then you can gain some understanding and be supportive of each other.
Yeah, and then I just want to underline you took the time to understand what was going on with each other, right? And then
Yeah.
that built a bridge to like, oh, greater understanding. Okay, we can do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know that's a common one actually for couples is one person goes down. They have
Yep.
a life challenge, they lose their job, they go into a depression, they have a midlife crisis, whatever it is, and it can be really taxing on the relationship. My wife and I certainly went through that both in our own way. I went through like a year-long meltdown, and she had her own meltdown, and those were very trying times. But
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is right on. Once we kind of understood what the problem was, there was an ability to have more empathy and like patience and understanding, and then really support each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Hey guys, if you want accountability in your relationship life, whether you're single or in a partnership, come join the Relationship School Roots community. All right. For just $47 a month, you can join us live every 2 weeks where I coach you on your relationship situation. And you get to meet amazing people on the growth development path, just like you. Go to jasongaddis.com/roots to apply. Mark, I want to ask you about your these two blog posts. What had you write? One of your most recent ones is you just did kind of a crowdsource question about marriage, and I'd love to get your take on what you gleaned from that. I know I
Sure.
shared that on Facebook, and then the other one is what had you write the other one where you felt like our education system is totally fucked, as you say in your first sentence, and one of the big problems is we don't teach kids about money and we don't teach kids about relationships. So I'd love to have you give us the why behind that and what you learned from those.
Sure. So the marriage post I planned on doing for a long time. I did actually the first time I did it. So when I turned 30 a few years ago, I just had the idea of like, I've got this email list of thousands and thousands of people. I should just ask everybody over the age of 40, like, what do you wish you knew when you were 30? And the amount of insightful and amazing responses I got was just, it was incredible. And so I built a post out of that based on the life advice I got from all these people. And it was one of the most successful posts I did. And so one thing I kind of decided, I was like, every major life moment going forward, I want to do this again. So, when I get married, when I have my first kid, whatever.
Yeah.
So I did it the week before I got married. I sent out the question to my email list again and in my Facebook page, and I got over 1,000 responses. It was close to 1,500 actually. And the funny thing about this time was, so I don't. There's a really famous Tolstoy quote. It says, "Every happy family is exactly the same. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." It felt like that because I said two things. I was like, if you're happy in your marriage and you've been married for 10, 20 years or whatever, please tell me like what you think worked. And conversely, if you are divorced, or suffered through a lot of like bad breakups, what do you think didn't work? And it was funny because all the people who had been married for like 20, 30 years and were still very happy together, they basically said the exact same things over and over and over again, to the point where it got kind of boring because like every single email was sounded exactly the same.
Yeah.
And then the divorcees, they all had their own special story. And so it was, on one level, it was a very fascinating kind of human experiment to see that. But on the other hand, it was awesome it was almost relieving to hear from literally hundreds of happily married couples for multiple decades basically say the same few things. And
Which were what?
so the biggest one was respect. And it was actually one thing my assistant pointed out to me is he said, you know what's funny? He said all of the married couples that have been together for like 30 plus years, they all say respect is more important than communication. And then he said all the divorcees and people who've been married for like 6, 8 years, they say communication's the most important.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
What I made of it, and what the older couples basically said is they said, look, like I almost feel like once you've been together for a couple decades, you start to realize like you're never going to communicate perfectly. Um, there's always going to be misunderstandings. There's always going to be moments where like one person doesn't really listen to the other clearly. That's just kind of human.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the older couples, what they focused on is they said like, look, just respect the other person. So when they screw up or when they don't listen to you or when there's a miscommunication, you don't think they're a terrible person.
Yeah.
Like you don't personally blame them for it.
Yeah.
You still see them as like a very good person of integrity. And that seemed to underlie everything
Mm-hmm.
because all the other advice that came out, so stuff about dealing with conflict and trusting each other and talking about like being very open and vulnerable about insecurities and things like that. None of that can happen if you don't respect each other.
Right.
Like, if you don't actually think like this is a very good person who I respect and admire, none of the other stuff follows. So that was the number one piece of
That's
advice.
pretty eye-opening, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. The other article, the school one, it's funny. So I have a little bit of like a bitter relationship with my own education.
Yeah.
Because for a few reasons. One is I was one of those people who was like perpetually bored in school and didn't do my homework a whole lot. But also because what I noticed by my mid-20s was like the most important things in my life I felt like I had to figure out myself. And so relationships was one of those. Personal finance was one of those. But also like what I noticed too, and I think part of this came from being an entrepreneur and a business owner, is that the way school works, which is like teacher says, do this, and then you have to do exactly what they say to the best of your ability. And then you get graded on like how well you replicate what the teacher wants you to do.
Yeah.
That I think that creates some really bad habits in people. Like I think that because when you get into the real world, it's important to fail. It's important to try and screw up. It's important to be willing to deviate from what's expected from you sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think school doesn't prepare you for that at all. So I just got I don't even remember if it was any specific one thing, but I've always just kind of been worked up about the education system in general and how I feel like it ill prepared me and a lot of people in my generation. And yeah, one of the big things is relationships. Like I was a total idiot in personal relationships.
Dude, yeah, you're joining the club.
Yeah, when I came out of school, and I noticed it with all my clients and my friends, and like you literally have to just stumble your way through your first few relationships and make a complete ass out of yourself to like get to the point where you can kind of like competently care about somebody.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a real challenge. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Like the education system was, I went to public school and I had one teacher out of 12 grades that actually had an impact on me.
Yeah.
I was just pretty checked out the whole time because I didn't feel like anyone reached me and I spoke to my values and what I cared about. And so I was always, what was cool about that was I was tracking all the social dynamics, obviously, because I was interested in relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Are you, well, I have so many different questions here as we wind down. What out of the, I want to come back to the 1500 blog post.
Sure.
For people that got divorced, I want to zero in on this for a minute. And they said it was communication. What
Mhm.
else did you make of that? And what else was mentioned that people can learn from that are listening here today?
What I took from that is kind of what I talked about earlier with, the struggles my wife and I went through is the emails I got from divorcees. They seem to stay on that primary level of he felt this way, I felt this way, and obviously he was wrong or she was wrong because X, Y, and Z reasons. They weren't going to that deeper level of like, why did this person feel this way? Like, why did I feel this way? Maybe I shouldn't feel this way. Um, and being able to find each other on kind of that deeper why level. Most of the divorcee emails, as you can imagine, it was like there was a lot of venting involved, and there was
Blame.
a lot of blame, and not just for the ex, but also for themselves. But again, I felt like a lot of it existed on kind of that more superficial level.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would be your advice to that group of people?
Well, the problem in relationships, and I'm sure you run into this all the time with the people you work with, is getting one person on that level of like having a deeper understanding isn't enough. Like you got to get both people there,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
because you can't force a partner to change, and so it's hard. I mean, I think the best we can do is simply work on ourselves. I've always said that like the best form of relationship advice is self-improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Improve that relationship with yourself and that understanding of yourself and your own emotions. Like develop that ability to question your own emotions and your own motivations, to step outside of yourself and try to look at yourself objectively. If you can develop that in yourself, and those skills have benefits all over life, not just relationships, but if you can develop those skills in yourself, then when the time comes in your relationship where shit kind of hits the fan, and it always does to everybody, um, you'll be equipped with the tools to better manage it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What would you say your top 3 hacks or tips are to improve yourself or work on yourself? What do you do?
Um, I think that everything kind of starts with awareness, self-awareness. I have a section in my new book where I call it the self-awareness onion. Um, and the joke in the book is that it's called an onion because every layer you peel back, is going to make you spontaneously want to burst into tears.
Yeah.
Um, but it's that section in the book. I really kind of dig into where where people's levels of awareness are. So most people, they start out, they're really only aware of their emotions. If that, a lot of people aren't even aware of their emotions. They're just kind of aware of shits that's happening in front of them.
Yeah.
The first layer of awareness is understanding how do you feel about the thing that is happening. And for a lot of people, it takes a lot of work to get to that level. And then the level below that is, why do I feel this way? Which is a very important level. And I think therapy is often a great tool to kind of help people start understanding, like, why do you feel sad? Why do you feel angry? Why does this feel unfair? Those are just questions that we're very bad at asking ourselves naturally. And then I even go a step further in the book that there's a level below the why, which is, what am I choosing? How am I defining good and bad? That is like, what is the yardstick that I'm using to measure whether this situation is good or bad? Basically, like, what are your values? It's just to kind of go back to the um, if my wife's going out with her girlfriends all the time, there are probably some guys who are like, dude, that's great. You get to hang out. You don't have to have the wife around. That's awesome. Like to them, that's a good thing. There are other guys who are like, that's horrible. Like I want, she should be with me all the time. And the reason two different men can have the complete opposite responses is they're measuring the situation, like their yardstick for judging the situation is completely different. There's there's a different value there. One husband believes a good marriage means that you spend 24/7 together. The other husband believes good marriage is you don't stick around and piss each other off all the time.
Yeah, you have a life or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's important to kind of dig down to those levels and understand, what's going on down there.
And do you ask those three, I heard them as three kind of inquiries or questions. Do you do that like journaling, or do you do that in psychotherapy? Do you do that with a friend or your wife, or?
You can do it all the above. I explain it much better in the book, but I mean, that's basically the goal of all of those. I see all those things you just mentioned, journaling, therapy, talking to close loved ones, even something like meditation can be like, they're all ultimately they're all trying to achieve the same goal, which is a deeper self-awareness of these like very subtle impulses and judgments that we all have in our minds.
And out of all of those, what is your go-to out of therapy, journaling, talking to loved ones? What do you personally, Mark, do?
I've never been a huge journaler, but I know a lot of people get a lot out of it. I did therapy when I was younger, which was very helpful. And I think these days I'm fortunate enough, being in the personal growth, self-development industry, I have a lot of very smart friends who are attuned to these types of questions. Yeah. So these days, I think I approach people around me, or like friends of mine, or my wife herself.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think I told you this when we met a couple of weeks ago, but I get thousands of emails, and a lot of them are relationship related. And I actually, my response became so common that I actually put it on my contact page. I said, if you have a relationship question, my rule is that before you can email me the question, you have to ask your partner first.
Nice.
Like whatever you're going to write,
yeah,
send it to your partner first. If that doesn't work, then you can contact me. And it's funny. My relationship questions like immediately got cut in half.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Fascinating. That's great. Nice. So transitioning just to the book here, you've mentioned it a couple times, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, right? That's the title. Tell us about the title and tell us about the book.
Sure. So the joke is that I basically wanted to write a book about values. But if I wrote a book about values, nobody would read it. So I put fuck in the title.
Yeah. My son, by the way, he looked at the book and he's just learning how to read, and he looked at it and he said, "Dad, what's that word?" And I said, "Fuck." And he was like, "Why is it there?" I was like, well, it's kind of I had this whole process with him about explaining it. It was great.
That's awesome. But yeah, basically the book is about choosing what we care about, and the importance of that choice, and how it affects all the different areas of our lives. Relationships being one of them. There's a chapter and then a couple sections about relationships in it. But yeah, I think it's something that, like I was saying earlier, like people don't ask themselves often enough.
Yeah.
It's like, why am I choosing to care about this? Like, what is driving me to care about this?
Yeah. One of the other things I appreciate about your book and just your writings in general are you really invite people to like say yes to the challenges, that you're not going to learn if you're not like failing and falling down and making mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. I very consciously wanted to, I wanted to write a kind of like a self-help book around negativity, that like, it's almost like a defensive negativity. Like problems exist, pain is natural, shit happens, get over yourself, like all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a big part of it.
That's great. And where can people, I'm guessing people can find that on Amazon or your website or any bookstore?
Yep, it's available everywhere.
Awesome. And it seems to be doing really well.
Yeah, yeah, it's been fantastic.
That's
Uh,
so cool.
yeah.
And you've got another, you mentioned to me, I don't know if this is out yet, but you said that your next book you're working on is a relationship book. Is that right?
Yes. I'm still I'm doing some research right now, but yeah, the plan is to write it this year and then hopefully have it published in 2018.
Wow, cool. Well, let me know how I can support you in that.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, Mark, thank you so much. It's been a treat here, and I just cracked into your book the other day, and I highly recommend it to the listeners, just because Mark's got this style of kind of a no nonsense, satirical, humor based way to grow, and I think some of us can get a little bogged down in the personal growth path, and I appreciate how you bring a lot of levity to it and humor.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and where can people find you?
Markmanson.net and, all the usual social media suspects.
Great. Yeah. And make sure you follow Mark on Facebook. He has a lot of, he reposts blog posts, new posts, and really just very valuable, useful little nuggets from his brain. So make sure you tap him there. Okay, Mark, thanks again. And I really appreciate you bringing it to us.
Yeah, thanks, Jayson.
Okay, Mark Manson, everybody. Nice. I'm going to repeat something he said near the end there, which is if one of you is working on it, trying to improve yourself and gain more self-awareness, and the other one isn't, you can't do it. Okay, almost every guest repeats that same thing on each episode. Pretty powerful and very understandable. You just can't do it, guys, if you don't have both of you on board. All right, here's your action step per Mark. Okay, building off this self-improvement, self-awareness piece, I just want you to write down, it's now March, I want you to write down one thing you're going to take action on this month for the month of March, just one thing you're going to do in March, this as we move towards spring here in the States. What are you going to do to improve yourself or become more self-aware? I, of course, would argue that just by being more self-aware in some way, you are going to improve the quality of your life, let alone yourself. So I don't love the term self-improvement because it sort of has this it sort of assumes brokenness or something in us. But I think you get what Mark means here, that if we suck at conflict, for example, we do need to improve that part of ourselves and learn how to be less afraid of conflict, let's say. Okay, so maybe for you, your action step in March is you can't just say, I'm going to get better at conflict. Well, what does that mean? Try to make it as specific as possible. What are you going to do? You're going to take a class? I am going to improve my ability to sit with my emotional disturbance by meditating 5 minutes a day, or meditating when I'm triggered, right? That's one you could do, right? As you know, the longer you can tolerate your emotional disturbance and upset, the less reactive you're going to be with other human beings. So pick an action step, okay, that's going to improve your self-awareness, or that's going to improve some part of you that feels maybe like needs a little boost, okay? And then here's the second part. I'm not done. The second part is you're going to get accountability. You're going to tell one person in your life this, and you're going to report back at the end of March. So that's the deal. Okay. You can do that in the Smart Couple group if you want in our community. You can do that with a friend of yours. You can do that in the Roots community, right? Our private group coaching community that we meet every couple of weeks. You can do it there. You can do it with a therapist, a coach, a mentor, a sibling, all right? You can do it with your spouse or the person you're dating. Pick someone. Why? Because we've got to come out of our little shell, our cocoon, and stop setting goals in isolation, because we can let ourselves off the hook all day long and get some accountability. Okay? Excellent. Now, with this episode, I just want to send you to get the 10 agreements of an indestructible partnership, because I think they're good. Since Mark just got married, these are things I recommend newlyweds or people pre-wedding to download. Okay, it's just a one-page PDF with 10 agreements on how to have a rockin' relationship or marriage over time. And remember, without agreements, you're sort of just relying on your patterns and habits, and there's nothing necessarily holding you, and your vows typically are not enough. They're not specific enough. And then you don't check in on them, okay? These agreements you can print out and paste on your fridge or your partner's forehead, and so you have that reminder, okay? Okay, everybody. Thanks for listening in. Go check out Mark's book. I'll include that link in the show notes, and have yourself a beautiful rest or exercise or lunch or work hours or time with your family coming up here soon. And we'll talk next week.